Okay, this is an incredibly complicated story. Elise, I know you can kind of boil it down to why it matters, what is happening and potentially happening with the Kurds in Syria.
Well, this is exactly what everyone feared, a free-for-all in what was, one of the most stable parts in Syria because of the, cooperation between U.S. forces and the Syrian Kurds. Particularly the YPG, and the U.S. had been supporting these Kurds to fight ISIS. Now that President Trump has announced that he's withdrawing, there was a lot of concern that he was abandoning the Kurds, which have really been a stable partner. And now it's a free-for-all where the Kurds have cut a deal with Assad. It's pretty clear. They've been kind of flirting with him for a while, but now they've cut a deal for Assad to come back into the area. And that leaves the Kurds free to go after their real nemesis, which is Turkey. They're looking for a separatist area between Syria and Turkey. And now this really leaves Turkey pretty vulnerable.
So, exactly. So when the president announced abruptly that he was going to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, and then the defense secretary resigned, one of the things that we heard from him and from others was concern that the Kurds would feel abandoned. And what you're saying and what we're seeing is they feel so abandoned that they cut a deal with a bad guy in the region from their perspective and most people's perspective, Bashar al-Assad.
This is a deal with the devil. I mean, just on a human level, imagine the thought process that you are turning to a war criminal who uses chemical weapons against civilians to guarantee your safety against a Turkish onslaught. I think our forces in this area have served as a deterrent. They've served as a deterrent to Turkey and their designs on the Kurdish forces that are there, but they've also served as a deterrent against Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad has not acted against the civilians in this region because we've had forces on the ground. He hasn't used chemical weapons there recently, and he hasn't used other forms of war crimes because our forces were there and he didn't want to get crosswise with us. The Kurds are making a calculation that working with the regime in the short term may protect them. They've worked with the regime before in other parts of Syria, in a region called Afrin. But I don't think they're fooled in thinking that this is a long-term solution. Bashar al-Assad is not a reliable guarantor of anyone's safety, including the Kurds.
And let's talk about what this means more for the region and then, I guess more globally. We're waiting, I believe that Lindsey Graham, who is a powerful force on these issues on Capitol Hill, has been an ally of the president on a lot of issues, but has been very outspoken against the president's decision to pull troops out of Syria, is saying that this is a nightmare for Turkey and eventually Iran, saying that this is exactly what Russia, Syria, and Iran wanted.
That's absolutely right.
Explain why.
Well, look, the U.S., as Sam said, was acting as a buffer, not just, in terms of fighting ISIS with the Kurds, but they were providing a buffer from the Kurds to go against Turkey. Then they were also kind of being a check, and this is why the U.S. was, a couple of weeks ago, going to stay in Syria, because they wanted to eradicate all Iranian proxies and forces out of Syria. So now, the Syrians, the Iranians, the Russians have a free rein in Syria. They've cut this deal with the Kurds for now. So the real losers here are the Syrian people and the Turks.
And you have President Trump saying over and over again, I talked to President Erdogan in Turkey. He's fine. He's going to stick with the Kurds. This makes it clear that's not possible.
He's going to stick with the Kurds. He's going to stick with making his promises of going after the Kurds.
Exactly.
I mean, it's pretty clear, the U.S. has been kind of beating him back, and that's caused a lot of problems between the U.S. and Turkey for, the last several years since the U.S. has been working with the Kurds. And now, they basically said to Turkey,
well, Erdogan will throw a temper tantrum. We should guess that he's picking up the phone right now and calling Vladimir Putin, not President Trump, to figure out what to do about this situation. But there's a bigger macro impact here that we have to keep in mind. The Russians today and for the past few days have been very purposefully painting the United States as an unreliable allies, an unreliable partner. And this fits with a broader narrative that the United States changes its tune on a whim, which is not entirely untrue at this point. You look at the international agreements that we've backed out of. You look at the allies that we're now abandoning. And this plays right to Vladimir Putin's larger designs of painting the United States as non-credible and as unreliable. Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia gave statements today saying that we were abrogating our responsibilities in the fight against ISIS. And so this really helps diminish U.S. credibility on a global stage, which will definitely impact our ability to promote influence around the world going forward.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, and it's, as you both predicted and many other predicted, the dominoes are starting to fall. Exactly. I just want to say that I mentioned that tweet, Graham, here's the actual tweet. If reports are accurate about Kurds aligning with Assad, major disaster in the making, nightmare for Turkey and eventually Israel. Big winners are Russia, Iran, Assad, and ISIS.
Completely predictable.